As you said, though, we were waiting on the mayor. The mayor is with us now. We always appreciate getting a few moments of time with the mayor, Darrell Steinberg. Very generous to join us this morning, so let's bring him in on the show. Jason Ross, Carmichael Dave, now joined by the mayor, Darrell Steinberg. Mayor, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, Jason. Hi, Carmichael Dave. How are you guys?
We're good. We're navigating, making our way through this. How about for you? I mean, not only responsibility for our city, but your own livelihood, trying to navigate through uncharted waters. How are you handling this?
I'm doing fine, and I'm very lucky that, I have a job where it's my job to be worried about others. And so I'm doing fine personally. I work out every day. I've adjusted to, doing this job largely from my den, although I'm now slowly getting out a little bit more. And, I'm very proud of the city and the way we're standing up a lot of assistance and help for people. And, for me, as long as I have that work and that purpose, I'm doing fine. I'm worried about, the struggling businesses, the people who are unemployed, the folks who, have really taken a hit as a result of the virus. And all of our work is about, beginning to do two things. One, to assure we keep people safe and that we don't ignore the fact that this virus is still out there. And secondly, to focus all of our energy on recovery, economic recovery, and helping people who are really hurting right now.
Mayor Darrell Steinberg joining us. So much to get to, including today being the Day of Giving. I know you're very involved in that. We'll get to that in a second. I want to just get right to it, and then I just have a quick follow-up based on what you say, Mr. Mayor. I've read about masks and where you stand, so would you mind sharing with the audience as far as when we start reopening, what we're doing there and why we're doing it?
So, yes, thank you, Dave. So earlier in the week, the governor said that today, actually, the state is going to issue guidance that will allow counties to begin opening up. We're going to start slow with some retail and curbside pickup, manufacturing, some child care, and then he gave counties the option, if we collectively can meet the various standards about the numbers of tests and the so-called contact tracing and ensuring that we have enough personal protective equipment and enough hospital beds in case there's another surge, that we can go beyond just those initial stages and we can open up more, including potentially restaurants and movie theaters. Now, this is going to be a county decision, and I'm in touch every day with Dr. Bielenson, who is the chief health officer for the county, and my colleagues over at the county. They're doing a great job. Dr. Bielenson's done a great job. Look, we have the lowest infection rate per capita in the entire country for the region, not just the county. So, that's a long way then of saying that if we are going to come back faster, and I hope that we do, that we have to take every precaution to ensure that our going forward does not get more people sick, have more people end up in hospitals, have more people die, and then from the pure economic recovery point of view, that we don't then have to go backwards because we've had a spike, and then see a resumption of these stay-at-home orders for longer and in more restrictive ways. And so what is the role of a mask? A mask does not prevent, but it sure helps. And the recommendation from the CDC in Washington, across the entire country and the world is, when you're out in public, now you should be wearing a mask because it may not protect you, but it may protect the person that you happen to come into close contact with. And, of course, we want people to keep this physical distancing, the 6 feet. And so I think as we return, that we ought to go from a voluntary requirement to a mandatory requirement. Now, there should be exceptions. I mean, if you're out for a run, whatever, by yourself, it may be hard to run with a mask. But if you're in a group setting, certainly if you're going into a place of business, everybody should be wearing masks. It's that extra precaution that may allow us to continue moving forward instead of going backwards.
And just a quick follow-up, Mr. Mayor, because we've just seen uprisings and anger from certain sects all over the country, whether it's Florida or Michigan, and I know you're very, very sensitive to that. Number one, I completely agree with what you're doing, but if you've got, I'm just wondering what the control factor is. You've got somebody refusing to wear a mask, somebody who is violating these rules. What are the steps to make sure? What's the enforcement behind that, if necessary?
Well, first of all, I mean, the purpose of a requirement is to send the right message and the right signal. And I believe that the vast majority of people will, in fact, comply if that is the order. Now, for those who don't, I mean, I think the way you handle it is the same way we've handled the physical distancing requirement. A little social pressure, first of all, from if you're in a grocery store and somebody doesn't have a mask and everybody else does, I think it's appropriate to say, hey, you should have a mask on, or the grocery store shouldn't let them in the first place. And, you know, the idea of citations and enforcement, I think in the most egregious cases it's appropriate because it also sends a signal to everyone. But this is not one of these things, just like the distancing issue, where you can really enforce your way into compliance. People have to know it's a requirement. The vast majority will comply, and more people will remain safe.
Talking with the mayor, Darrell Steinberg. It's interesting, you know, Dave and I do this every day, and more and more, we're seeing more messages coming in like, hey, guys, I think it's time to go back, or the economy, and we need to get this recovery. And there are portions of people that think that way. I'm curious, how much of that do you hear, and what do you say to those that say, I'm ready, I want to go back, and let's go. So how do you handle that?
So I listen, I take it in, and I listen to it, and this is the way I kind of divide it. If it's a question of inconvenience or our own leisure versus the public health is going to come first every single time. As much as I miss the Kings, as much as I miss the fact that, you know, the Giants would be leading the West now by 10 games if the baseball season we're on, as much as I miss that, I know that isn't nearly as important as ensuring that more people don't get sick and or die. So that's one level. But there's another level, and that is where people are really suffering economically. And I shouldn't be so cavalier about sports because, of course, with the Kings and elsewhere, there are a lot of working people who depend upon the sports leagues and other major entertainment venues to make their living too. So I should qualify that. But I'm trying to make a broader point where there is true economic suffering, where the small businesses cannot continue, and then a family cannot have what it takes to be able to pay the rent or to live. If people are 20 plus million people unemployed, the number of unemployment claims being filed in the country at record high, that to me, if it's not a public health issue, it comes close. And so that's where the balance comes in, because we cannot maintain the way this is forever. We can't wait for a vaccine for a year and a half, and keep the economy closed. We have to make some choices here, and bringing back businesses, bringing back working people, I think is vital. And so it's not a question of if. It's increasingly not becoming a question of when. It's becoming a challenge of how. Because if we come back slowly and we do it in the right way, with masks, with physical distancing, with different physical spaces in our offices and in our restaurants, and then we monitor every day, every week, are we spiking, are we not spiking, and we, as the governor used the word, toggle back and forth, I think we can inch forward, maybe by more than an inch, maybe by a foot or by a yard, and get people back to work. But if we don't do it right, if we don't answer the how question in the right way, then all of those desires to open up again and need to open up again will have to go right back to where we were. And so it's the how. And that's why the mask question comes into play, why I made my statement, why we have a lot of work to do around how to maintain physical distancing in various workplaces, and the tragedy, guys, and just tell the truth, is that it's been such an abysmal failure at the federal level to have a national strategy around testing, that while we will have more tests in California and in Sacramento, we're going to get up to 2,000 a day and be able to test a lot of people, including in our diverse communities, that it's not enough to do a more scientific going forward regarding how to return to work. And so we're just going to have to do this in a controlled way with the right protective equipment, the right distancing, err on the side of the public health, but at the same time, do our very best to put people back to work and put small businesses back where they can open and serve their customers.
Mayor Darrell Steinberg with us, and first part of this interview kind of on the ground up close. Let's go up to 50,000 feet. You first came on my radar, and a lot of people listening, during the fight for the Kings. And when you look at that period and all the things you did with the state senate to help get the arena through, and then how it's just steamrolled, and for the longest time, just watching the growth of this city, the arena, Doco, the pending MLS stadium, the convention centers, so many great things and momentum happening in the city. And I can't help but wonder, Mr. Mayor, and I know it's an unknown, but in the back recesses of your mind, a lot of this progress was, of course, based on forthcoming revenue from business, crowds, parking, etc. Would you mind giving us for lack of a better word, a progress report? And are we anywhere near any danger when it comes to this shutdown affecting our budget and our general fund money?
So, in the recesses of my mind, in the middle of my mind, and in the front of my mind, I am incredibly optimistic about the future of Sacramento for a variety of reasons. We have laid a great foundation, and even though this is a setback, not just for us, but for, again, the entire world, we are better positioned to be able to recover. And I'll give you a couple very quick examples. On the budget. As you know, in 2018, I led a campaign to pass the sales tax Measure U to extend it a half cent. Now, the purpose of that money was to invest in our neighborhoods and workforce development, in economic development in general. Well, we're going to suffer an overall loss of about $90 million worth of revenue over the course of the next year and a half. But because of that second half cent, it actually becomes a rainy day fund. And while we have a little budget work to do, we think we can get through this without layoffs, without massive cuts to public safety and our other essential services. That is not something to take for granted when you see what's going on throughout the entire state and the entire country. So then you ask, well, what are we going to do about economic development? And if there was ever a doubt that growth is a good thing, here is this lucky break. When the federal government, the Congress, and the President drew the line on what cities would get direct federal aid, they said they're only going to give aid to cities with a population of 500,000 or more. Guess what we came in 2018? We came in at 508,000. In the early 2010s, we were in the 400,000s. So if anyone doubted that growth is a good thing, growing industries, growing jobs, saving the Kings was a good thing, the difference between 499,000 and 508,000 is a check for $89 million for the city of Sacramento that we received 2 weeks ago. And so our work now is to take that $89 million, which can't be used for the budget, and invest it directly in economic recovery, anything related to COVID-19. And so we have a real chance now to regain our footing. $89 million is a lot. It's not going to be everything. But to regain our footing, and certainly for our big assets like the arena the Golden One Center, the Convention Center, the Memorial Auditorium, the Community Center Theater. We are going to get through this. And certainly if this were to last another year, I mean, we might be having a different conversation. And of course, we don't know exactly what the future is, but I'm not Pollyannish about any of it. The state's announcing they've got a $54.1 billion deficit. In the city of Sacramento, with a little luck and the fact that we've got this extra money because of the sales tax, our budget is in relatively okay shape, and we've got $89 million to invest in responding to the COVID crisis and economic recovery.
That's great to hear, and that's another thing that's exciting. Dave brought up right off the top is a day like today, the big day of giving. Hey, you can give the $89 million to the big day of giving. I know that isn't the era you're going to do it, but that's a time.
It would be a record.
But so many people have been so wonderful in this over the years, and maybe it's a little more trying now, but still is a great day to think of that and to give to other enterprises in our community.
There could not be a more important big day of giving, even if most of it has to be done virtually, because so many of our community-based organizations need help more than they've ever needed it. And whatever your passion is, if it's the arts, if it's food, if it's homelessness, if it's helping your neighbors, whatever it is, there is an entity to give to. There are big organizations, there are small nonprofits, and this is the day to try to set a record, because the $89 million is one big tool, but of course, no amount is going to be quite enough. We sure are hopeful that the new $310 billion of small business aid from the last stimulus will help a lot of Sacramentans, and then we are pushing really hard in Washington to make sure that the next stimulus package contains direct aid to states and to cities, regardless of their size, because there are a lot of cities in this region outside of Sacramento that obviously didn't meet the 500,000 threshold and need help too.
Well, this is hopefully people do their part today in the big day of giving. Mayor, we thank you so much for giving us your time. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Sorry, Jason. Just before the mayor goes, I just want to end on with the hardest question of the whole interview. You obviously you've got politics in your blood, Mr. Mayor, and I just want to commend you. The way you threw in at the beginning of the interview that you're working out every day, that's a great flex. And I think some people miss that. But I just want to point out that's how smooth Darrell Steinberg is. He threw in a great flex about him working out every day right at the top. Congratulations.
It's too bad it's radio and not TV. That's all I can say.
We'll have visual proof when we're all, a chance to be together again.
We will, and you guys really thank you for keeping people's spirits up as well, because sports is so important, and we all miss it. It's life's great diversion, and as I said earlier, it's also the living, not just for the athletes, of course, but for a lot of working people in Sacramento, work in and around the Kings, and of course soccer, and this will come back too, and it'll come back, maybe a little bit differently in terms of the way arenas are configured and the stands, but we'll be rooting again soon. There's no question. But you guys keep the spirits up, and for all those listening, we're not just going to get through this. We are getting through it, and better days ahead.
We look forward to that. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Talk soon, guys. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.